Hi guys, how are you? It's Matt Christopher, and it's been a while since I have produced one of my videos, but now I have the time and I'm going to start producing quite a few videos for my channel and, may I say, regularly. Now, today's video is called Past, Present and Future. Now, the reason why I produced this video is that in the intervening time since my last video, the helpers of the governing body have emerged as prominent drivers of the organisation. So to put it in context, the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, they're the 8 members of that all-powerful committee, are the driving force behind the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania / New York, or Jehovah's Witnesses as they're commonly known. But what has happened is that as this aging group of men that make up this all-powerful group of governing body, they have a backup committee which is called the Helpers. Now, the Helpers have been emerging for some years as the acolytes of the governing body. They have supported them, some for over decades, through various decisions that they've made, whether it's the remodelling of the organisational approach from the rivers of gold that was once coming from their printing facilities to its birth as a multimedia organisation and corporation. And also, of course, more recently, the diabolical decision to strip loyal members of any real tangible assets, which is the selling off of the kingdom halls, which we've seen right around the world. So for those who are not aware, Jehovah's Witnesses, over a number of decades, built up an incredible portfolio of properties. They're places of worship. They don't call them churches, but kingdom halls. And these primarily have been built from donated materials and, of course, free labour. So this group, these acolytes of the governing body, the Helpers, have been pivotal in the decision to basically to liquidate these hard assets and the millions upon millions of dollars of assets have disappeared into the ether of Watchtower affiliate corporations and accounts, never to be seen again. Now, what we see is the changeover, the baton changing over to the Helpers. Now, what I want to talk about is the past, of course, the formation of the governing body, the present and the future. When J.F. Rutherford, the second president of the Watchtower Society, decided that the freedom that the Bible students had wasn't going to be for him, and that there was going to be a birth of a new nation, and he was going to be basically a spiritual and religious dictator. And all authority was taken away from the then ecclesias and was focused slowly on, well, himself first of all as president of the Watchtower Society, but later on the formation of the governing body, who would have Orwellian authority over the rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, the issue was that what Rutherford was able to identify is that the pull factors for Jehovah's Witnesses were limited. It was an organisation that shunned involvement in politics, was frightfully opposed to education and continues to be, and any civil engagements was limited to the very extreme, and also things like home ownership, having children, which was spoken about before, or preparing yourself for your later years, your retirement, or your pension was even looked down upon as an attack on the organisation and not having faith in their God, Jehovah. So how are you going to attract people? Now, one of the things, the masterstroke that Rutherford came up with was this idea that he was able to do two things: predict when the end was going to come, and also hold out the carrot for what was going to be offered in their apparent paradise in the world to come after the destruction of all ungodly people. So Rutherford was the author of, first of all, a discourse, which became a book and then, in a sense, became a mantra, and that was "Millions now living will never die." Now, remember, this was around the 1920s and 30s, in which this propaganda really came into swing. So from then on, the governing body took on this idea, and successive presidents from him took on the idea of the carrot and the stick approach of the end, and also that they being the only safe place from this doomsday that was going to come against all of humanity, bar loyal Jehovah's Witnesses. So at that moment, what Rutherford did as the first president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, that was under the auspices of Jehovah's Witnesses from the 1930s onwards, was three things. Number one, an Orwellian control over its membership. Number one, being led directly from New York, and all semblance of individuality was lost. Secondly, the carrot and stick approach. Now, number one, you had millions now living will never die, and then, of course, the end being around the corner. Now, what Watchtower did is, while they demanded complete loyalty from its members, what it did is it started building its multinational corporation, okay, into a money-making venture. Number one, under Rutherford, they started printing their own publications, where previously, in the time of the first president, primarily most of the literature and the books and so forth were actually printed by commercial printing companies outside of Watchtower itself. They brought that in. It was done in-house by, of course, yes, voluntary labour. Now, we know that at the peak, the zenith of the Watchtower and the Awake printing cycle, they were probably looking at somewhere around about 40 million copies a month from these two journals, and of course every book that they published was an instant bestseller. So that was just rivers of gold coming in for Watchtower. Now, successive presidents, Nathan Knorr, and then on to Franz, did the same thing. What they did is they brought their own style of millions now living will never die, and we know that, especially coming up towards 1975, there was once again a prediction of when the end was going to come, and then the request for loyal members to disown themselves and to focus on Watchtower. Now, what did Watchtower do during that time? It did three things. Number one, it built its branches around the world, especially from the 1950s and 60s on. They went into hundreds of countries and basically replicated what was happening out of New York with a headquarters, a branch facility, and then they had the congregations there spread out. That was number one. So the branches, basically the regional headquarters, which they set up, usually very large parcels of land, in which volunteers would build these huge complexes, and then also there would be a printing which would be done in-house in many of these countries. So what we see is that also at the same time using this free labour, they started building their kingdom halls right across the world. Now, what has happened is we come down to the post-1995 members of the governing body, is that they realised that the printed page was no longer going to be a viable alternative, a viable route, I should say, for them to continue their rivers of gold. And secondly, there was thank you, Charlie. Secondly, there was declining numbers of people becoming Jehovah's Witnesses, especially in the developed world. Not only were they not coming in, but there was a mass exodus, which we see today. So what we see is that they decided, and this is where the helpers come in, that after their last failed prediction of when the end was going to come in 1995, and previous to that, there'd been a massive boom in the building of these kingdom halls, with the anticipation that there would be this huge crowd of people that were going to come in just before the end. Now, what we do know is that this was simply just propaganda. What they did is they built a massive property portfolio right around the world worth billions of dollars with voluntary labour, and also with these massive complexes, which were their headquarters within many nations around the world. They were able to amass a multi-billion dollar property portfolio. Now, we come to the present, where the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses know quite simply that the game is up. They are not able to repeat the predictions of the end time prophecy anymore, and certainly it would have no wide appeal anymore. So what they decided, with the help of the helpers, is that they were going to change their business model. Now, one of the reasons why the helpers are so critical is because most of the people that are associated with these helpers do not claim to be part of Jehovah's Witnesses' elite 144,000 who are apparently chosen to go to heaven. The helpers are actually people that claim as Jehovah's Witnesses that they're going to live forever on earth. Now, this is significant. Okay, see, when the present members of the governing body that claim to be going to heaven when they die, let's just say that they pass away. Well, when they pass away, unfortunately, these helpers can then say, well, you know what, we're continuing the work because, of course, the visible organisation is going to be here, and we're going to start transforming it into a paradise after Armageddon. So it's only logical that they would bring into focus those who claim to be living on earth to be running the organisation. Now, as I said, the printing business is over, and we see that major corporations such as News Corp, they have divested themselves in many ways of their printed their print side, and have gone to the full digital side. And of course, that's what Watchtower does. It follows the money. So it wasn't any divine direction for that. It was simply just following the money. Secondly, when it comes to the physical buildings, well, if you don't have the printing anymore, you don't need the headquarters as such, and so that's why they not only sold off $1 billion worth of property in Brooklyn, New York, but also various headquarters or branches around the world were sold off for multi-million dollar sums. And also for the kingdom halls, well, the fact is that while the claim that it was unedifying that God's people were in rented buildings to be serving God, that was simply just a lie. What it was is an excuse to build a property portfolio. And we know that over the last, for instance, the last 10 or so years, that the property market in most countries around the world has increased dramatically. And now we're certainly in more a downward spiral. So what a better time to liquidate assets now? You move everybody online, and they of course take the hard currency, and that is invested in their various investments that many have spoken about previously in other videos. So where to in terms of the future? Well, the fact is this, that with the elimination, or at least the massive reduction of the physical kingdom hall and things being online, Jehovah's Witnesses are going in the way of the what I would say the televangelist style, and also the Netflix style of approach, where people subscribe. And I think that's where we're going to come to with Watchtower. Now, the issue that I think is really important, especially for those who have family that are still Jehovah's Witnesses, and that is that this one-trick pony, it's over. You see, with it moving online, and more focus on things being online, is that there is no need, first of all, for Watchtower to even promise that they know when the end is coming. Okay, they are providing, in many ways, religious entertainment by the content that they are producing. They also know that the population of Jehovah's Witnesses, especially in the Western world, is an ageing population, and also no thanks to their absolutely idiotic policies of not encouraging Jehovah's Witness families to have children, or even in many cases to get married. So that's of their own doing. So they, as I said before in other videos, they need to simply just walk their mature age population, unfortunately, into their graves. And they know that if they can hold them long enough, there'll be a massive windfall for the organisation. Again, we know that many people, most Jehovah's Witness families, have, if they have a number of children, have certainly lost at least one or two to the organisation. And the antagonism that Jehovah's Witness families have towards their own flesh and blood that have left the loving organisation is palpable. So we do know, and we hear this all the time, that Jehovah's Witness, loyal Jehovah's Witness families have cut non-Jehovah's Witness children out of wills. Where to for the future? Number one, the great steal, and that's what it is. It's the great shonk and the great steal, the great hysteria that there was this great need for building and for developing and for massive printing facilities because the time was at hand. It certainly wasn't, it isn't, and it won't be. Jehovah's Witnesses have never, I should say, had any advanced knowledge of Bible prophecy, ever. They, in their very actions, show that they have little or no respect for the Bible whatsoever, let alone the modesty that a true Christian should have when it comes to interfering in other people's lives and consciences. The future for Jehovah's Witnesses is a small target, may I say, an extremely wealthy small target. Jehovah's Witnesses have realised that having large swathes of people is a liability to them. It is only a matter of time until lawsuits, not just that of sexual abuse that has been aggravated by the policies and procedures of Jehovah's Witnesses, but also their shunning policies at some time will bite. And we know that the organisation has done everything possible to shift the blame for these shunning policies on the local elders of Jehovah's Witnesses, as if it was their responsibility I should say, to these policies, and rather they are simply just following the immoral orders from Watchtower itself. What I see for the helpers is that when the present governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses pass away, I think that the next group of helpers will not claim to be part of the 144,000 elite of Jehovah's Witnesses, but really those who are going to be stewards of the new world and the paradise that they claim that only they will inherit after the destruction of all ungodly people. Ungodly, that is, those that do not believe in the Jehovah's Witness ethos. I think what's going to happen is the shift will be in two areas. Number one, the heavy-going doctrines are a thing of the past. Jehovah's Witnesses have been found to be erroneous in nearly all aspects of their understanding of Scripture. Books such as Revelation Grand Climax at Hand, by their own admission, were flawed and lacking insight and proper, accurate understanding of world events. When we look around the world today, it doesn't line up with its bold claims in that book whatsoever. What I see is two things. I see that there'll be a shift from the 144,000 of their elite onto what I believe is the caretaker role of the helpers. And I think that's the way the Watchtower is going to spin it. That once the likes of Jeffrey Jackson, Anthony Morris III, and Stephen Lett pass from this earth, I believe that the helpers will claim that they are in a caretaker role until the destruction of this wicked system, and that they should be preparing themselves for life in paradise earth now. And I see a shift. I see that what they're going to do is to, as I said, water down any opportunity the Jehovah's Witnesses have in real time to be able to meet together and to discuss together, because the kingdom halls themselves became a hotbed of a hotbed of discontent, I should say, I'll get it out, discontent for Watchtower itself. It became and has become more a exercise of viewership rather than participation. While Jehovah's Witnesses said that the COVID virus was going to be the mark of the end, and also that, and this is the beginning of this pandemic, that we only had months left. Well, unfortunately, yes, COVID has affected many people, but certainly did not bring the end of the world on, nor has or will this conflict in the Ukraine do also, no matter how much Jehovah's Witnesses wish for that to be the case. What I see is that the qualifications of the helpers and how do they get into these positions is, I believe, they're being duplicit. I believe they're being duplicit in the cover-up of the sexual abuse of the members of Jehovah's Witnesses. I think they're being duplicit in the cover-up of their defence of the shunning policies in the courts. I believe that they have been fundamental in the divesting of the physical assets, which then, once these have been turned into cash, have simply just disappeared into the ether. They are the ultimate yes men, and for that, the helpers certainly will inherit and they will have the inheritance of Watchtower after this group of governing body have long passed. So I anticipate that a small target will be the aim of Jehovah's Witnesses. We see that they are trying to fashion themselves into a social ministry. The articles that they may have online are trying to present themselves as middle-of-the-road Christians, and they're nothing like that whatsoever. So I hope that this little roundup of past present, and future, and this little discussion on the helpers is enlightening to you. Please leave your comments and please like and subscribe. I'm Matt Christopher, and thank you very much to the nearly 60,000 people who have participated in my YouTube channel. I'm very appreciative. Hope to talk to you soon. I'm Matt Christopher, and thank you for me, my friends. Bye.